I asked him one time how he sold dogs, and he said, well, like you sell any other product, he said, if you got an old bad dog that's not worth much, he said, price him real high. He said, put him out there, that way you can sell a good dog. I said, how's that? And he said, well, a good dog brings, back in the halfway back in the 60s, he said they bring $2,500. And he said, if I get a dog that ain't much, I'll tie him right at the foot, right in front of the entrance of the pound. And said, they'll say, boy, that's a pretty thing. He said, I know it, but that's my dog. We going to sell that now. That's not for sale. And they said, I show them some more dogs, but I always wind up right close to this pretty one. Mr. Walker, whose dog is it? He said, it's my dog. I hunt with him. Well, he did, and he told the truth. And Drecky would say, look over here's one here for $2,000. Here's one for $1,500. And he'd wind up back over at the old pretty boy and said, well, how much would you take for him? He said, no, I don't want to sell him now. He's not for sale. And they said, now, Mr. Walker, everything's for sale. Put a price tag on him. He said, okay, $2,500. And that's the one they'd buy. But look here was his back. Here was his guarantee. He said, I want to tell you, that's such a good dog. If you take him home and you don't like him, you bring him back and swap him for any dog in your, well, he was the highest dog in there, see? You take him home. So you take him home. If he don't suit you, bring him back. You have any dog in here for him. I'll trade you. Well, if you had a $1,500 dog, you give $2,500 for it.
Where's Fielder? He's gone to the dogs.
Welcome, friends, once again to the Gone to the Dogs podcast. Your host, Steve Fielder, here with you one more time. And man, do we have a great show for you today. This podcasting thing brings some very interesting people into my life and thankfully into yours if you check us out each week here. And today we have a great guest, a rare find, somebody that I am just so happy to bring to the microphone. And, today we want to talk about a guy that you coon hunters out there, especially those that are a little long in the tooth like I am, will remember so very well from his ads in Full Crime magazine every month, Cas Walker from Knoxville, Tennessee. And Cas is such an interesting guy and with so many stories that were attached to his interesting life. But I've got a guy right here that I'm going to introduce to you now that knew Cas about as well as anybody in the country. And I'm just not going to keep you on the edge of your seat anymore. We've got Mr. David West from Powell, Tennessee with us. How are you doing today, David?
Doing great. Pretty sunshiny day sitting here in my swing.
Man, I tell you, living the good life, aren't you?
Oh, it's just, I got semi-retired. Of course, I'm into several different businesses, and the music store is, my cousins run it, so I can take time off now and kind of enjoy the things that the good Lord blessed me with.
Well, you mentioned the music store now. If I'm correct there, that's called the Ciderville Music Barn? Or
yeah,
what's the
Ciderville Music Store, David's Music Barn. It's a whole bunch of, it's like a little center there, like a little shopping center. And in the building where we have the music is also church on Sunday. Different people rent different parts of it. One of them, in one of the buildings is they make real precision clothes, like tailor. It's called the tailor shop, like for suits of clothes for expensive people and police officers and stuff like that.
Oh, well, that's really interesting. Well, I know in some of the photos that I saw of inside the store, you got a barber chair in there, don't you?
Yeah, we used to have a barber shop there, and I sold monuments, and I had one of my logos was dead or alive, we need your business.
Oh, that's great.
We've had so many different businesses there down through the years, and it's just been great. We've had a great life, and we always had good musicians, some from Grand Ole Opry. We've had the Grand Ole Opry stars there. Chet Atkins, Kitty Wells, Bobby Wright, Johnny Wright, Martha Carson, Bill Carlisle, just to
Wow.
mention a few of them. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just been a big thing down through the years.
What a lineup. That's just awesome. And I've been near there. I think the other day when I called trying to chase you down, you're a hard man to catch up with.
Yeah, I know.
And I talked to Steve. Now, is that your cousin, you say, or nephew? Or?
It's Doug. Doug is my cousin.
Oh,
He's one
Doug is your cousin. Okay.
Yeah.
I talked to a young
Steve
man.
is the guy that works there.
Oh, I see. Okay. And he was telling me you're not far from that Museum of Appalachia, are you?
Yeah, I played in one of the shows there Thursday night. We're about 15 minutes away from the Museum of Appalachia.
Well, I've been there. I went to a wedding. My first cousin's daughter got married there a few years ago, and interesting place. It's a step back in time for sure.
Good possibility. I played for it because I was staff band for a long time there.
Well, it's very possible that you did. That's amazing. Well, David, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. I want to kind of, for my listeners that may be younger and maybe don't know what we're talking about here and all, I want to lay just a little a broad bio of Cass Walker, and you can certainly add volumes to anything that I could say. But Mr. Walker probably is best known, especially in your area, for his supermarkets, the Cass Walker supermarkets, and he was also later the mayor of the city of Knoxville, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. Mayor, vice mayor.
Yeah, he was a councilman, I think.
Councilman. He was a great politician and really tried to help the people and help the country and the county and the city, and done wonders for Knoxville.
Well, anything that I can read and find about him, I find that to be true. But he was just such a colorful guy. And now my listeners are going to remember, as I said before, his ads in Full Crime magazine, where he would sell his coon dogs. And that's, this market or this audience that we're talking to today, David, are primarily people that enjoy, as Cass did, hunting with hounds, coon hunting with hounds.
Oh, yeah.
But just go back and before we get to the dogs and things like that, and tell us your association with Cass.
Well, I was in interest with a art shop that done his signs. We made his scissors and did all of his cartoons on his windows and stuff of that sort. But I played for Bonville and Buster, which was another TV show, the one that he named. And he always liked me, and I would go over there and work with some of the bands when they needed help. And then one day, Fred was two of the comedians on there, and Fred he lived in one of my apartments, and his car tore it. Well, we was on every morning. We brought television on 5:30 to 7. And I would take Fred up there, and when I did, Mr. Walker, he was so funny the way he hired you and fired you. He just walked by and said, "Get David to check his week. I put him on payroll." Well, I didn't say nothing about getting a job because you have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be there at 5:30, Yeah. And when he did, I was ashamed not to go ahead and work because anybody hired you thought as much of you as he did. And so I went to work and stayed 9 years with Mr. Walker, and then I become his driver. And then I got in partners with him on some things. And not only was we business partners, and I was his employee, the first guy that ever gave me a hospitalization. And not only that, he was one of the greatest friends and smartest person I ever met in my life.
Well, he was a brilliant businessman. And if you read this book that I have here in front of me, it's called Cass Walker, Stories on His Life and Legend, by a fellow named Joshua S. Hodge. And I understand Mr. Hodge has since passed away. But he went around, obviously, and talked to as many people as he could that knew Cass and had a story to tell. And some of them are just terrific. And since you mentioned this thing about him just saying, give you a check and put you on the payroll, you told me a story the other day that I thought was hilarious about the young man that came on and that wanted to kind of maybe prematurely join in the conversation there. Can you remember that story that you told me?
What was it he did now?
No, you said
the conversation.
Yeah. You said that he kind of upset Cass a little bit there.
Well, what it was, the whole band was standing there, and he had just hired this young boy, like 16-year-old. He just hired him probably to run groceries all over the town, and the boy was real quiet, and he was standing there, and everybody was telling jokes. And when they did, he was going to tell a joke himself. He wanted to fit in, and he said, and he'd just been working with Mr. Walker part of the day. And Mr. Walker was a guy, he liked to know you a little bit before he got close to you.
Yeah.
And that boy said, Mr. Walker lies so much, he has to get somebody else to call his dogs for him. And boy, he took offense. He took offense for that and fired him right there on the spot. And the poor little boy dropped his head and started to walk out. And one of the musicians said, Mr. Walker, said, what did you do? That said, you broke his heart. Said he thought he was joining. He thought he was one of us now. And he was telling a joke, and he wanted everybody to laugh. And said, look at him. Said, he's crying. Mr. Walker said, go get him. He said, son, I want to tell you, I can take a joke good as any man on earth. You're back on payroll. And he hired him and fired him and had him back in 15 minutes.
Hired him, fired him, and hired him again, all in 15 minutes time.
Yeah, all 15 minutes. He was a sport, and he was a guy. He reminded me so much of Harry Truman, the buck stops here. Mm. Whatever it was, if he was wrong, he told you real quick, yes, I was wrong. I remember they said, did you ever make a mistake? I fired the Everly Brothers, didn't I?
So he had the Everly Brothers on the show, and he ended up firing them. What's the story on that?
Well, when he hired them, he hired the Everly family. Mama run a cash register, and Daddy worked in a store, and the two boys was just real young. And he hired them to sing country and old mountain music.
Yeah.
And that's the way they come in and presented itself to the job. Well, every time TV come on, them boys would sing Problems or Wake Up Little Susie. They singing songs they wrote.
Yeah.
And they was far from when you and I was young Maggie,
Yeah.
And Mr. Walker told him, said, I don't like them songs you boys sing. And that twist you're done said, it's not going to sell groceries. He said, I hired you to sell groceries. And of course, they would straighten up for a few days, and then they go right back to their stuff. They was wanting to try to get to push their sales. And he just come in and fired them. And he never would harm back. But they told him, said, we've moved here. We have no place to go, no place to live. I said, please hire us back. And he would say, come in here, and he'd give him a big basket of groceries, bananas, and all kinds of stuff. And when they did, I heard one of the Everly boys say, we knew we wasn't going to get a job because Daddy come out carrying a bag of groceries. That's enough to keep us from starving to death. And he said they had to go back home, and we went to Nashville. And we did like to starve to death. And he said, we was just about to give up. And Chet Atkins, I believe, was helped them some. And first thing you know, they got going.
Well, that's so interesting to me, David, because I grew up in southern West Virginia, and we had a fella, and I went to church with him, that was on a much smaller scale, but he started some supermarkets in our area called the Carolina Supermarkets, and he got his name because he'd go down to Carolina and get a load of produce and bring it up and sell it on the side of the road. And one thing led to another, and he built it into some I think he had about 3 stores in our area. Yeah. But I read an article, a paragraph in this book that I want to share with my listeners real quick because it kind of reminds me of my youth growing up, because I went through, well, the deal was he gave me my first really job where I had to punch a time clock. I had a paper route before then. But my job was to carry out groceries in this supermarket, and we had these big green buggies like that had a big container on top and a shelf on the bottom, two wheels on the back, and man, we'd load them up, when people would come in first of the month. And they'd buy a 25-pound bag of flour and 25-pound bag of sugar and maybe a 5-gallon bucket of lard. And when the checks came in on the 3rd of the month, it was a big payday, But in this one story, I'll read it real quick, and it said in the well, wait a minute, I want to make sure I got. Okay. He told the story about him. They told the story about him sprinkling coffee on the floor, so when people walked in, they'd smell coffee, and they'd go back and buy a package or a pound of coffee. Which was pretty good marketing. They had sawdust on the floor, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you remember those days at all? Or?
Oh yeah, shavings and sawdust both.
Yeah. Well, in this story, he said that Mr. Walker got upset with his butchers because when the meat came in to sell, they were trimming it. And when they trimmed the meat, often they weren't careful, and they would not only trim the fat, but they'd trim some of the beef on there. And he said, "What are you doing with this?" And they said, "We're throwing it out." He said, "No, no, no, no." He said, so he had had them to package it in 2-pound packages and called it Family Pack. And he sold it for a pretty good price, and people would buy it because it was cheap. But at least he got money for it instead of having the butcher throw it out.
Yeah.
Now that reminds me, though, so much, and I'm going to quit talking because I want to hear your stories. But anyway, this guy that I worked for, his name was his first name was Posey. And he would have us, when we got a boxcar load of flour in, if some of it got wet or whatever, and the bags were he'd have us open up those wet bags, and there'd be good flour down in the middle. And we'd pour it up in brown bags and mark it, bursted bags, and he'd put a price on it and put it on the shelf and sell it. So the point being, those guys knew how to make $1 when it was hard to make $1.
He could make it work. So he would he would buy peanuts, and he would get real cheap drinks. He wouldn't get Coca-Cola and Pepsi and stuff. He'd buy cheap drinks out of Kentucky, and he'd get a little cheap cherry drink. They call it. It was a cherry drink and a strawberry, and so he he named them Strawberry Fizz. See, they just sold them to him as strawberry drink. He called it Strawberry Fizz, and he put it in a big cooler and put a lot of ice around it, and he'd sell a bunch of them peanuts, salted peanuts, and they had to buy them old drinks, and he'd buy them for a little nothing, and he would sell those. And then he would throw chickens off the roof. And if you could catch one in your apron, you could keep it. And then what he would do, he said during the Depression, he couldn't get you couldn't hardly get meat. Yeah. If you could, the little stores couldn't afford it. So he went to the big meat company and told them, he said, "If you go in there and stock my meat counter full of meat, I'll put a mark on one of my cash register keys that all the meat sales, you get every bit of it. I don't make no profit on it. You sell it retail." I said, "You all will make all the money." I said, "But you have to keep me stocked in meat." And he said, "I drawed rich people all over the country. Boy, that Cas Walker got a meat market like nobody ain't got." But he didn't make nothing off the meat. But boy, he got that crowd in there, and he sold them old salted peanuts and that cherry smash and all that stuff. And he said he had to do something to draw them in, see?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why he got some of his crowd in. And one day, he wanted to buy the front page of the paper. And he's going to make a big Cas Walker day out of it. And they told him, said, "We don't sell the front page to nobody." He said, "I'll give you 3 times what you're getting out of it And I said, no, you can't buy the front. We don't care who you are. So he decided he'd just get it anyhow. And he went out and bought no cheap $10 wagon, no farm wagon. Parked it right in front of his store, filled it full of old loose hay, called the fire department, called the newspaper, called TV, called everybody, and then lit it. When he heard the sirens coming, he lit it. And there it was the next day on the front page. Big fire at Cas Walker's supermarket. He had the whole supermarket on there and all of it. And that wagon was on fire.
That's amazing. Well, when you tell
he took it for nothing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great story.
You couldn't beat him on anything. He was so smart.
So quick. Well, this bit of throwing the chickens off the roof, I think the TV show WKRP Cincinnati may have got their idea from Cass. I don't know if you ever saw that show, but one of their most popular episodes were where they were dropping turkeys out of a helicopter.
Yeah,
and the guy, Mr. Carlson, the owner of the station, said, I swear I thought turkeys could fly. And they were dropping like bombs, all around anyway.
Well, he was, he did a lot of stuff like that. So Bill Carlisle from Grand Whopper was going to come up and help us with a big promotion. And he said,
Jumping Bill Carlisle, huh?
Yeah, Jumping Bill. I picked some for him. Me and him was big buddies.
All right.
And I'd go down and see him at the Grand Opera. But anyhow, Mr. Walker, I said, let's throw some chickens off the roof. He said, no, let's do turkeys. Well, I knew if you throw turkeys out there nowadays, you'd knock somebody's glasses off or they'll scratch you or something happen,
Yeah.
So I went and got froze turkeys, and then I went and got about 2 dozen of those fold-out paper turkeys. And I got one of those big lifts and put Mr. Walker in a chair, raised him up to the top of the roof. And I let him throw paper turkeys off, and it said, you've won a turkey, or you've won a gallon of cider, or you won some guitar strings, or you won this, that, and the other. Every turkey had a gift on it. And some man turned me into Humane Society, said he didn't go along with us throwing them turkeys off. They're going to be jerking their feathers out and hurting them. I said, well, what are you going to eat for Thanksgiving? He said, turkey. I said, somebody had to kill it, didn't they?
That thing put his neck on the block.
And he said, well, maybe. He said, I don't want you to do as I do. Do as I say do. He said, I want to eat turkey, but I'll let somebody else do my dirty work for me. And I said, so they called me from Humane Society and said, we're getting complaints on you letting Cas Walker throw turkeys off the roof. That's cruelty to animals. I said, I think you're right. I said, because I went to one of the chain stores and got a dozen turkeys or 2 dozen turkeys. And I said, when I got them home, I looked at them. Somebody had froze them, cut their legs off from them, took their insides out, took their heads off, took their feathers off. And though they was frozen in these plastic bags, I said, I thought that might be cruelty to them. And then I said, what are you going to do with these? And they said, you put them in the oven, bake them to 350 degrees, and then you take them out, put some dressing in them, and then you eat them. And I said, well, where they wind up? In the chicken coop? No, he said, in the septic tank. And I told that woman that. Oh, she just started laughing. She said, well, I had to make his calls. That's part of my job.
Oh, well, I see how you got along so well with Mr. Walker.
Yeah, I just make up my own stories. Okay.
Real quick, let's tell our listeners, how old are you, Mr. West?
I just turned 81 April the 30th.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, yeah. I wonder, there's 2 ways I want to go here, but I don't want to leave any chicken on the bone since we're talking about chickens. Dolly Parton, tell me a story.
Well, Dolly worked with him, and she started out as a little girl. And back then, Mr. Walker put up greasy poles. I don't know have you ever heard of the greasy pole concept?
For the kids to climb, right?
Yeah. And he had me to do it on some shows, and we'd skin them poles, and then he wouldn't put grease on them. He'd go get cheap lard and put on them. Lard was slicker than cheap grease. You get him out there in the sun. So Dolly, Mr. Walker said, Dolly come in as a little kid, and everybody was trying to climb that pole. Said she's a little tomboy back in. And so she went out there. She tried to climb that pole about 3 times, and then she went over at that bucket of grease and rubbed it all over her front part, all over her bib overalls. Said she's wearing little bibs. Said she dressed like a little boy. Said she put grease all over her overalls, and then she went out there and laid in the sand and got sand all over. And she went up there and climbed that pole. He said, I know right then we had dynamite on our hands.
Absolutely. And she hasn't looked back, has she?
Yeah.
Well, you're not that far, from Dollywood and all that thing that she's done there in Sevierville or Pigeon Forge in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and tell me a Porter Wagner story.
Porter, I didn't never know very well, but
okay.
He had out some really good songs back then.
Yeah.
But I think that when it started out, Porter probably thought that, he was an asset to Dolly. He helped her. Of course, Mr. Walker took her, I think, dinner, and a lot of other people helped her. But when she got with Porter, to start with, he was helping her, and then just a short time later, she was helping him.
Yeah,
see?
For sure.
And I don't think he could live with it very good. And
okay.
Mr. Walker told me a lot of stories about it. How he needed her way more than she needed him.
I see.
And it's just where it goes sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes the student gets ahead of the teacher.
Well, I grew up, as I said, in West Virginia. I was born in 1946, so I'm not that much younger than you, Mr. West. But we always had, from the time we got a TV, and I was about 12 years old when we got the first one. And my dad was from Dixon County, Tennessee, grew up playing a fiddle.
Yeah.
Arthur Smith that used to play on the Grand Ole Opry was
from
there.
Some of his pickers used to pick with us on the Bonnie and Butcher show. Tommy Vale and and different ones of his musicians.
Well, my dad tells us
Carl Hunt, the banjo picker. Me and him was good buddies.
Yeah. Well, my dad tells a story about one of the shows there in Dixon after he became a popular Grand Ole Opry star and so forth.
Yeah.
And he took a break, and they said, somebody else play there while, he's taking a break. And somebody said, my dad's name was Holman Fielder. It's funny. My grandmother who got that name, I don't know, my listeners know that we've talked about that before. But anyway, he said, well, let Holman can play. And so he got that, he described it as that old yellow fiddle. And he said he played there a set or two, while Arthur was taking a break. But the point I wanted to make was that, I grew up with that music. I grew up with those shows. You talk about Bonnie, Lou, and Buster. I've watched them many times, and Bonnie would always say, okay.
Okay, yeah. They were good Christian people, really good people.
Oh, that's great to know. And then when I listened to Porter, and then when Dolly was on his show, they'd say they're flour towels. You can't buy them. They're in boxes of Breeze. They put a towel in the boxes of soap. I just often wondered how much soap did you get if it was stuffed full of a towel. But I grew up on that stuff, Dave.
Yeah, I did too. You knew Arthur Smith, so he wrote Dylan banjos.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's
him and Don Reno first played it. They played it with 2 banjos. Arthur played tenor and Don played 5. I worked with him on Opry with package deals. But they called up to Cass Walker show to find out who wrote it. And Red Rector told him he thought that it was Arthur Smith. And he said that on top of that, said they didn't call it dueling banjos. They called it futin banjos because it's 2 banjos.
I see. Yeah. Well, okay. I want to explore, and again, I want to talk about Cass as much as possible here. But now this farm, home and farm hour, or farm and home hours,
Home
what it
show,
was
yeah,
called,
farm
right,
home
show.
hour, yeah.
Okay. I remember going to my aunt's home in Oak Ridge on the way down to Dixon on vacation, and seeing Cass on TV in the morning, and sometimes he'd bring a couple of coons that he'd caught the night before and throw them down on the floor. But now you were in the band that played for that show every day, weren't you?
Yeah.
You played banjo, didn't you?
Yeah. What years was that?
Oh, my.
70s, 80s?
It could have been really for me, that was probably more in my high school days, 60s, probably through maybe
68, 69 or somewhere there.
Yeah, through
there.
there.
See, I was with him 2 times. I was with Bonnie and Buster and him both at one time. In the 60s, I went with Bonnie and Buster. I was with them both shows for a while. And then I went off and quit, and we went on the road so much. And then I got with a political party, and when I did, then I went back with Mr. Walker and stayed the last 9 years at his own.
I see. Well, that's great. And there was a story there that I thought was really interesting in the book, talking about you and him going to church.
Oh, yeah.
And about the guy said that the Lord had been good to Cass. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, I do. We would go to church. You know, I never did know him to go to church with anybody but me. But we would go to church, and so he'd say, they'd always put us on the front row, and we'd get on the front row, usually sit, and Mr. Walker never did whisper. He talked loud, you know. I mean, he started, and they said, we've got David West and Cass Walker with us tonight. Said, would you like to say something, Mr. Walker? He said, I believe I would. And he got up walking to the stage because he didn't want to get up. He wanted people to hear him. He wanted to get to the microphone. Yeah. And he went up and he got up on the microphone. While he was headed up to the microphone, this guy preacher said, boy, here comes a fellow the Lord's been good to. Mr. Walker walked up and said, yeah, and I want you people to know I've been good to the Lord too. And so the next day we were driving, that whole life, the whole church life. And next day he explained it to me, and it was Bible, you know. He said that, well, they laughed, but said, you know, the Bible said, draw nigh to me, and then I'll draw nigh to you. He said, if you ain't good to the Lord, don't expect him to be good to you.
That's good.
And I was, I did some kind of a speech at a church one night, and this guy called me from Alabama wanting a Martin guitar, and he said, hello. I said, you David West? I said, yeah. He said, I want to tell you something before I order a guitar, but he said, if you'll be good to the Lord will be good to you. I said, well, where did you hear that at? He said, you closed a sermon out at church one time in Luttrell, Tennessee, and said you got up and told the story about Mr. Walker, and you told that and said that stuck with me ever since. So it's so good, you know.
Well, it is a great story, and
we went to another church. You got to hear this one.
Oh yeah,
we went to another church, and they had some. You remember Sherry and Jeff and Sherry Easterly, the bluegrass people.
Yeah, the bluegrass people.
Yeah, they're on Bill Gaither a lot.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, they were on that show at night, and the Joyful Sound, there's about 5 groups. Joyful Sound was real hot down here at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were good. And well, we got up there, and when we did, you drink water.
Yes, sir.
When we did, of course, as usual, they put me and Mr. Walker right on the front row. Well, the Joyful Sounds got up. Sherry and Jeff got up. They put them on first because they were big stars. Both of them were stars, I guess.
Oh, yeah,
at that time.
For sure.
Even Joyful Sounds was big stars, too, at that time. But they put the Easterlies on first. They were so good. And Mr. Walker, You can hear him all over the church because you hear a pin drop. I'll tell you right now, that's a good group. Them people sure can sing. Ain't they good? And everybody was looking at him because you hear a pin drop in there,
Yeah.
And they come off, and then, see, he didn't know none of them. The Joyful Sounds went on, and when they went on, they were good too. And he hollered out real loud, said, I believe this group is better than that other group. Right out real loud. Everybody started to laugh, and they couldn't.
Oh, that's funny.
He told you what he thought, though.
I'm sure.
He said, I'm one of the mixed upest guys that you've ever met. Said, I'm a Republican. My wife's a Democrat. I believe he's a Methodist and she's a Presbyterian. And he says, they say, well, how do y'all get along? Good, because I love her. He had a saying for everything.
Yes, I read. Go ahead. Please go ahead.
What he done, since we're talking about coon dogs.
Yes.
He had a Rambler car he traveled in. He had a big old dog box built. Took the trunk lid off and put this big dog box in the back. And he'd go somewhere, and he'd take his wife, she'd go with him, and she didn't want to ride in that old stinking car, so I just keep riding to smell them old dogs. So he found him some pills somewhere that if you give him dogs these pills before you put them in your car and haul them, while it hit, the odor would be real sweet, smelled more like honeysuckles. And him and her was going down the road, and she said, "Whoo!" Said, "Boy, that smells pretty good. What is that?" He said, "Well, it's them honeysuckles over. See, they're blowing right now." Oh, she said, "This is so good this time of year, and it's them dogs just found." And then he bought a dog one time, put in the car with us, and it was real cold weather. And he said, "I know you boys, there's 5 of us in an Opel station wagon with a dog now, a big old dog, coon dog, one of them great big ones." See, he invented the walker dog. He crossed 2 dogs and made a walker dog. And when you see those signs, that's his breed of dog. And he bought a walker dog. He bought a walker dog, put in the car with us, and we was going down the road, and it was cold. And I said, "Man, it's cold out there." And Fred Smith said, "Yeah, David," said, "if it gets too," he said, "I was froze to death." And then from dogs said, "I got snowbound and the car got stuck." And said, "I had 5 dogs." And so I got in the back of that station wagon and crawled under them dogs, and said they kept me warm. Said they saved my life, kept me from freezing to death. And Fred said, "Well, David, if it gets too cold, just throw on another dog."
That's right. Well, there's a story about that rock and roll band, 3 Dog Night, and that was like apparently the Eskimos did that too. So maybe Cass Walker was ahead of his time there with that.
I think he was. He did them dogs, wasn't he?
Do you remember any other thing related to the coon hunting? And I know that he went down to Georgia usually to go coon hunting.
Yeah. Well, he owned 3 Kindles. He had one down yonder at Third Creek, and he had one at his house in Woodbury. Woodbury. He had 3. I think he owned Woodbury at one time. He had 3. I know he had 3 Kindles at one time.
Yeah.
And they would tell me that people would say, "Oh," I'd say something about Cass Walker, and "Oh yeah, I work for the airlines. I know him. He puts them old dogs on there." Said he put them on a plane, put them in a cheap old crate that he said they'd eat out of them, and there it was running wild back on the back of the plane. And said they'd bite you if you went back there. They didn't like nobody, but he on it said, "Oh, they're telling stories about
I see.
And they scared them, but he, the way he corrected them, had them all named, and he knew what their names was. And I asked him one time how he sold dogs, and he said, "Well, like you sell any other product," he said, "if you got an old bad dog that's not worth much," he said, "price him real high." He said, "Put him out there, that way you can sell a good dog." I said, "How's that?" And he said, "Well, a good dog brings, back in their halfway back in the 60s, he said they bring $2,500. And he said, if I get a dog that ain't much, I'll tie him right at the foot, right in front of the entrance of the pound." And said, they'll say, "Boy, that's a pretty thing." He said, "I know it, but that's my dog. We going to sell that now. That's not for sale." And they said, I show them some more dogs, but I always wind up right close to this pretty one. Mr. Walker, whose dog is it? He said, it's my dog. I hunt with him. Well, he did, and he told the truth. And Jackie'd say, look over here's one here for $2,000. Here's one for $1,500. And he'd wind up back over at the old pretty boy and said, well, how much would you take for him? He said, no, I don't want to sell him now. He's not for sale. And they said, now, Mr. Walker, everything's for sale. Put a price tag on him. He said, okay, $2,500. And that's the one they'd buy. But look here was his back. Here was his guarantee. He said, I want to tell you, that's such a good dog. If you take him home and you don't like him, you bring him back and swap him for any dog in here. Well, he was the highest dog in there, see? You take him home. So you take him home. If he don't suit you, bring him back. You have any dog in here for him. I'll trade you. Well, if you had a $1,500 dog, you give $2,500 for it.
Yeah.
That's a good dog trade, wasn't it?
Oh, he's a dog trader. There's no doubt about it. And there was a lot of them back in the day, David. You know, the magazines were full of that. And you don't see that much anymore. In fact, you don't see those ads the way Cass did. I know that the fella that I talked to there that grew up in Knoxville, Jason Wood, and talked about that and all about reading those ads of Cass's. But all across the coon hunting world, from most coon hunting is done in this country from the states that border the Mississippi to the west, then come back east. Okay, there's not a lot of coon hunting on farther west than that. But coon hunting has been extremely popular, all across the country. And Cass was a feature. Well, a lot of people, when they talk about Cass, they talk about the videos they see on YouTube about him saying he's going to put the people that are snatching purses in his parking lot, he's going to put them in a hospital and things like that.
Oh, yeah. He fought. He was rough. He didn't care. He didn't break no ice with anybody.
Oh, he grew up in Kentucky, as I understand, right?
Yeah.
And that's where my grandparents on my mother's side came from. And there's funny stories. Do you ever tell you, or do you hear about the story when he got his finger bit off?
Yeah. I'm driving him. We was going down the road. We just going down the road, and back in those days, in the 60s and early 70s, mid 70s, all up through there, you didn't have cell phones. So when I'd drive, he would get in his car, and at the office, they'd hand him a stack of mail 6 inches high, and he'd look through his mail, and he'd read it to me. And I'd driving him, maybe we're going to Harlan or Hazard or Virginia or somewhere, and he'd say, looky here, listen what they've offered me for this. I remember one time he said, they've offered me $70 million for this right here. And I said, sell it. Nope, I can't sell it. I said, how come? He said, I just give the IRS $35 million of it, and I ain't gonna give nobody that kind of money. I've worked that hard, and only he said some choice words. But anyhow, we'd go down the road, and I guess we just ran out of something to talk about. And he had that finger down, and he said, I looked at him and I said, Mr. Walker, can I ask you a question? Yeah, go ahead. We talked about everything. He really told me about personal stuff. How to do any business deal I want to do, he told me how to do it. And I think the night before what I want to talk about, but this particular day, I said, what happened that caused your finger turned down? He said, I got in a fight and the guy bit it off. And I said, did he bite it plumb off? He said, he bit it off and spit it out on the ground. And he said, I grabbed it up right quick, put it in my coat pocket. And I took off to the hospital and they sewed it back on, but they couldn't do leaders. And I use it for my tooth for a quarter finger, 2 cans for a quarter. And I said, well, what did you do to him? He said, I bit his ear off. I said, you bit his ear off? He said, yeah. I said, he died last year. And I said, he did. He said, I went to his funeral. I said, how come? He said, I wanted to see how much of his ear I got. And I said, did you get? He said, I said, how much did you get? And he said, a big chunk. And I said, well, what'd you do with his ear? Did you give it back to him? He said, no. I made sure he didn't get that ear. I chewed it up and spit it over somewhere else where he couldn't find it.
Oh, my goodness.
That might be too bad to her, but that's a
No,
true
no,
story.
no. That's fine. It's funny, and it's that story is in the book, and you're right on it. According to the
He
way,
told me. He
yeah,
told me
you're
that
the
one personally.
yeah,
Personally,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. That. Well,
yeah,
it was a different time back then. We like to say men
yeah.
were men. And you settled things. You didn't go, as a rule, you didn't go out and shooting people and all. You just settled it. And
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
well, listen, I want you to tell me a little bit about. Well, let's see. I wanted to. There's so many stories. Oh, what do you know about the Digger Odell story?
Well, the Digger Odell story was the guy came by and he was needing money, and he told, see, Mr. Walker, he went along with, he loved promotions. He loves anything different. And we had a goose eating contest, and he had that down at my music barn. He showed me how to do it and all. He showed me how to do all kinds of stuff. But this guy said, I'll let you
Wait a
bury
minute,
me.
a goose eating contest.
A goose eating contest. See, when I first opened up my show, when I made the auditorium big, I said, Mr. Walker, will you come out there and help me open it up? And he said, yeah. He said, no, we got to get a gimmick to get them in there. I said, you get this big goose and get you a bunch of corn, put 50 in each cup, 50 grains of corn in each cup. And when they buy it, they have to say, this will make them buy a ticket. When you buy a ticket, you get to write down how many grains of corn you think the goose will eat. And if you guess it, you win. He give away $25 worth of groceries, and somebody give away some furniture, and somebody give away a shopping spree. Oh, it's a lot of money on it.
Yeah.
And it's way back there. And he said, now you can give it, if you want to, you can give one item to whoever wins and let it start building, or you don't have to give them nothing. Next week, it's just going to be more stuff on it. He said, you can do it any way you want to. And I said, well, since it's the first night, let's just give it to first, second, third closest ones. And he said, okay, that'd be good. So he told me, he said, you put this goose up now, don't feed him nothing for 3 days. So he'll be really hungry. Well, I took him at his word, but you don't feed a chicken for about 3 days, they're about ready to die. And I brought that goose in there, and he was so weak he couldn't hardly stand up. And I I put his corn down, and he just looked at it. He's too sick to eat. And I petted him around a little bit, and he wouldn't eat no corn, so we had to do it the next week. Well, the next week, I got me another goose. Of course, he come out of it. He come out of the kinks. I got me another goose, and he said, I said, I knew then to put him up about, 12 hours.
Okay.
You put him up about 12 hours, buddy, he'll eat 50 grains of corn just fast you feed him. His craw swells straight out like a softball, and then he'll swallow it. And then what you do now, when you feed him that corn.
Now, y'all listen when you have this goose eating contest. Now, listen to this.
Okay.
No, you go ahead, David.
Okay, you have to have a cup of water because he eats 50 grains of corn that's in his craw. And he drinks 2 or 3 sips of water, and you can see his craw just disappear. Looks like a gourd on his neck, it just goes out. And then he'll eat 50 more. A goose will eat anywhere from 50 to 300 or 400 grains of corn. A big goose. Now I'm talking about a great big goose. They were pets, and they're great big.
Yeah.
So the boy that put him up, he put him in there with the feed barrel and left the lid off, and the goose eat corn all week. I mean, all day, all that night and day. Well, he come in that night, and he said, no, and they guessed big numbers, 50 and 300 and 200 and 150. And that goose just looked at that corn. He didn't want no corn. He just come out of the feed barrel. And he finally choked down 3 grains. Of course, nobody won again. And Mr. Walker said, I believe we got a Seventh-day Adventist goose because he just ain't going to work on Saturday. Or he called it Sabbath, But then after that, we got it straightened out, and he started eating right, and I had winners all the time. I can show you where I give away a lot of money. It was just a big thing. Now we get on Digger Odell. And he liked anything like that he could do. So Digger come by and said, I'll let you bury me for so much a day. And Mr. Walker jewed him down to a little less. And so when he did.
Now, wait a minute. I got to tell my listeners now, this guy made a job of going around and being buried, right?
Well, he come up with the idea. He thought that they told him that Cass Walker would do anything, any kind of promotion he wanted to do. And he said, I'll let somebody bury me for some money. And he's supposed to stay in the ground 30 days. But he didn't make it. But what it was, Mr. Walker said that he got in there, and I think he was paying him $100 a day. Mr. Walker said it was $75. I thought they settled on $100, but it could have been $75 a day. Of course, that's a lot of money back then, because that's way back there. I went up there and looked at him, looked in there with him. And so what he done when he did this, he had him fixed down there, place had it some way he could use the bathroom, they could get it out. And they could put his food down there to him, let him eat. And he had a pipe run down so he could breathe. Well, when the money got up to, it was going to be, I think it come out $3,000 for a month. Maybe it's 30 days in that month. It's $3,000. So he stayed in there 10 days, I guess, or something. And he got up to $1,000. And he told me his wife was wanting him to come home. Said she had other things on the plate. Said she got missing him. She was wanting him to come home. I think what it was is that he told me he couldn't breathe good down there. And said what I done, I went and had him put some stovepipes down in there so he could really breathe. And said I looked at it and I had him put a top over it and make a wishing well out of it. And said it took in 10 days. It took in $1,100 and I only paid him $1,000. Said I made $100 off him being in there. And he said my store was they was lined up back in. He was open 24 hours a day. And he said that, you talk about crowd. They had to line up to go around and look at him. It was a big thing. I remember when my daddy went over. But anyhow, the doctor said if he's wanting to get out, and he said, I'm not going to let him out because he ain't sick. And said, I'll just hire a nurse. I'll hire a nurse to sit with him. 24 hours, I'll hire nurses. Well, what Mr. Walker done is went and bought 3 nurse uniforms and put it on them cashiers and got them in stethoscopes put around their ears. And they worked around the clock. So he had 3. He said, I took one from each shift. And she just sat out there and pranced around. She'd stick that thing down there and let him hold it on his heart and listen to his heart and shake her head and said she was just a cashier. She couldn't even know what she was listening to. And said,
oh, my goodness.
He finally got him. I think he kept him 10 days, I believe. And he had to dig him out because he got wanting to come out. He said, I can't stay in there that long, but it's somewhere along yet.
I thought the great part about that story was when he was ready to get out and Cass said, you're all right. We're going to leave you in there a while longer.
He said, you're going to stay in there until he went and got them nurses to stay with him around the clock. And
oh, my goodness. What a character.
O'Dell. Yeah, I went and saw him. I remember him.
Yeah. Well, now, Cass, as much fun as we've had telling the funny side of Cass and all, he really was a successful politician and ran the city of Knoxville, which is no small town. And he was quite successful and was actually a very popular candidate, at least among
really the forerunner of Walmart. Because I know the guy that worked, it was a big good friend of Mr. Walker's. He put the computers in Walmart, and he said, Mr. Walton is so much like Mr. Walker. He said, I just almost feel like I'm working for Mr. Walker when I worked for Mr. Sam Walton. And he was so smart of a man. And here's something he taught me. When I first started driving for him, he said, David, never get nobody by the coattail and try to pull them back. He said, run beside of them, steal every good trick they got and put them in your sack of tricks, and you'll have more tricks. He said, don't try to pull them back, because if you pull them back, it's the wrong direction, and you'll wind up number 2 man. You never will be number 1. Because when you get at the end of the line, you still got the coattail.
Mm.
And then another time he said, listen, don't think I'm Cass Walker. He said, I am not Cass Walker. I work for Cass Walker. Cass Walker is a name of a company. And I work for Cass Walker, David, just like you do. He said, because if I don't give me a salary and work just like you do, I'll probably go busted. He said, so, and I know when we drove to these stores and things, he had big old, they really cooked in his stores, like potato cakes and mashed potatoes and beans. They really cooked them. And he'd just walk up to, we'd get our plates, go through the line, get our plates, and say, how much is both of them? I'm going to pay for David's. He's driving for me. And he would pay for, if he even got a cold drink, he paid for it. I mean, he said, it's got to be run like a business. It's going to be one.
Mm. Yeah.
He taught me so
he
much
knew,
about making money.
yeah, and that there are so many parallels there to the guy that I worked for as a kid. You know, I worked 12-hour shifts from 9 to 9 on Saturdays for $1 an hour. That was minimum wage at that time. And of course, you know, I didn't. That was fine. I was glad to get that $1. You know, because
heavens, yes.
because I think my parents there off and on, they'd give me 50 cents a week. Maybe they called it my allowance, and that was enough for me to go roller skating on Friday night. But but that learning that work ethic, as he obviously did. Now, he started out. Did he start there in Knoxville, or was his first store there? Or do you know?
Yeah, I think his first store was.
Yeah. Well, quite the interesting fellow. And now you were on that TV show that you were on with Cass. Was that on Channel 10?
Channel 10 BR. In fact, he owned a station at one time. The station started in Knoxville and it went under. It couldn't make it, and the congressman, and got to him and said, Mr. Walker, you're going to have to close that station down. Okay, when Mr. Walker said that's the last thing I need is a TV station, they asked him would he take it over and run it. He said, so they won't lose it. And he said, someday, television just wasn't very strong right around here at that time. We had ATE, and it just wasn't strong enough for two big major stations. NBC and CBS, it wasn't strong enough for both of them.
Yeah.
But anyhow, the reason he chose 10 because it went to Virginia and Kentucky better than 6. 6 went a different direction.
I see.
And his stores was in Virginia and Kentucky, and he needed somebody that he needed to be on a television that went that way. So he said he paid for the light bill. The light bill was ridiculous for 1 to 2 years. I believe it was 2 years or part maybe almost 2 years. And then he told him that he wanted to be on it. Well, see, he didn't have to pay because the sponsors, he said, I'll get sponsors enough to pay for me, and that'll really help you. So he got, of course, Kern's Bread and JFG Coffee and Wolf Dairy Milk, and he had several of them that sponsored him.
Right.
And they paid for his time, and then he charged, I think back when I was on there, it was I believe it was $60 a minute. That's what a spot cost back in. But it was maybe the first time or second time, I forgot which, but it was a hot station when CBS was, when it, after it stayed on to it, got up there where it could make enough money to pay for its way. But
yeah. Well, typically, I'm going to ask you this. What was a typical show like, one of the Farm and Home Hour shows? What was it? How long was it? 15 minutes?
It was an hour and a half.
Oh, it was an hour and a half. Wow.
Yeah, you started television went off at 12 o'clock at night.
Right.
And, moments in the story of Jesus, and they saluted the flag, and then he came back on. We'd get there about 5:30, about just maybe 20 after 5, we'd get in there, and they'd put them stripes, and had to line the thing up to get it on the air some way. You'd have that red, white, and blue, and all that stripes, and you sit there and watch all that setting up.
Oh yeah, test pattern.
Then it'd come to us, and it was so hot under those lights. They were 1,500 watt, 2,000 watt bulbs, we had them suits on, ties, you could feel water run down your back, even in cold weather. But anyhow, then we'd pick up the morning paper when we hit the street, we'd sing it, and we'd come on and Mr. Walker would talk, and nobody had a program, and he'd just look over and say, I want David in a banjo tune next, because he loved the banjo. And I'd have to play a banjo tune, or he'd say, get that girl back up here to sing. She's pretty good. We get her up. And it's just one thing to
just off the cuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And when he'd say, get up there, David, and get ready to pick. While he's getting ready, I was already ready. But he'd say, while he's getting ready, I want to tell us about this dog now that I've got lost. Well, he may talk it all the way into a commercial, and you didn't even get to pick. And he'd say, I've got a dog. I was at Crossville hunting, and somebody stole my dog. I know, because he didn't come to the car for me to bring him home. And if you don't find that dog, if you don't call me up and give it to me, I'm going to turn you in, because I saw some of this funny weed growing down there. And before we get off the air, they'd be trying to buy him dogs. And, hey, Mr. Walker, don't tell him where that's at. I'll buy you a dog. Well, they'd find his dog for him. And I mean, he'd do all kinds of stuff like that. And he'd get those things he wanted, but then he'd do a commercial. He would go over and talk about dogs and fighting and beating people up on the parking lot. And it'd say commercial time, because every so often you had to do commercials to get all them commercials in. And when they did, then the FCC sometimes would watch, and they'd get upset. They said, you can't do that. That's not a talk show. It's listed as a country music show. Said, what he's doing, said, between him talking them commercials, you ain't played but one song or two in a whole hour and a half. Said, now that's not. So they'd ball the TV station out, or FCC would. Well, the FCC, the TV station would come in there and say, Mr. Walker, they say, Mr. Walker, you're going to have to get more songs on here, because the FCC's on our butts for it. He'd turn right around to us and say, you all want to play more music. We're going to play more music, but we couldn't play, you wouldn't put us on. And we'd say, I've been on there when you do, for the hour and a half, you do 2 theme songs, about 30 seconds coming on, 30 seconds going off, maybe one song for the whole show.
He was the show, wasn't he?
He was the show, and he's wound up sometimes. If he was into politics or a lost dog.
I read the story about how he was going through all the specials he had this week at the store, and there was a can of oil or something there. Do you remember that story? There's a story in the book anyway. I just briefly, he was going down the line. Here's a pound of coffee for so much. Here's a can of pork and beans for so much. And then he picked this can of oil up somebody left sitting there on the thing. And he said, well, here's this so-and-so kind of oil. We'll sell that for, and he put a price on it and went right on down the line.
Yeah.
He was the master of improv, I guess. He just whatever came to mind, there he went.
And he sold him kazoos, you know what they are.
Oh yeah, sure.
He sold a fire of them. I still got one I bought from him. I believe it was a quarter back that day. He had somebody could really play him, and I thought that was a hot item.
Yeah,
he could sell. This boy came to him one day, and he had ledges on his front windows. He had ledges where you could sit there. A lot of people sit there and eat a sandwich or drink coffee or something on the ledge of that window. And he was sitting there one day resting, and this fella came in and he said, Mr. Walker, said, I got back scratchers. I said, boy, these are really good things. And it was pretty, and they did work good. And Mr. Walker said, you think I can sell on David? I said, Mr. Walker, you could sell anything that you wanted to. And he said, well, how many have you got? I said, I'd probably need about 300 or 400 to start with. And that guy said, I ain't got but a dozen. He said, what? A dozen? Well, I can't buy nothing for a dozen. He said, it wouldn't be worthwhile fooling with. He said, if you get 300 or 400 of them, call me up and we'll work out a deal on it. He said, the guy just walked off. Another thing, one day he had watermelons. He's selling them, cheapest in town. That guy come in with that tractor and trailer. He said he didn't know how many tractor and trailers he owned. But the guy come in with a tractor and trailer, and he said, Mr. Walker said, I ain't going to unload them watermelons. Said, I saw a diamondback rattler on them things down there in Georgia. Said, it's right in that truck, that big old rattler's up in the truck. Said, I know he's still in there. Mr. Walker got on the walkie-talkie in there in the store, and he said, give me somebody out here to unload these watermelons. Said, there's a church snake laying up here on them. Just be careful, don't get bit. A church snake. Now, like from snake handlers, he says a church snake, he won't hurt you, I don't think.
Oh my goodness, what a guy! He had a comeback for everything, I think, didn't he?
Oh, he did.
Yeah. Well, Mr. West, we've talked here almost an hour, and it's been delightful. And I know that I've probably taken you away from your dinner and everything else. I hear the roosters crowing.
Yeah,
one would think that it would be early morning when we're doing this, but it's here
5:30 in the evening.
Yeah,
5:30 in my time. And what it is, I've about got him trained. This guy gave him to me last week, and I holler. And usually when he hears my voice, he starts crowing. He knows I'm around here somewhere.
Yeah. Well, let's talk real. He hears your voice and he crows, huh?
Yeah. I'm teaching him that. Go ahead.
I got you. Well, now about your store and your music personally, when did you start playing the banjo?
Well, it was because of Cas Walker, I guess. I was 16-year-old, and Don Gibson was coming down and drinking. I was 13 when he started drinking cider. He played at a club right above me up there. Jerry Lee Lewis and everybody, and Don would come down, and I'd watch the Cas Walker show, listen to it on the radio, and I said, boy, I love to hear those people pick. And I got me a harmonica and learned to play a little bit, and I got thinking, boy, if I sit on cider and stuff, I got thinking, boy, if I could play music, or if I had me a bunch of good musicians, that'd be a good way to promote my business.
Right.
Well, I couldn't afford no musicians. I thought, well, shoot, I just learned to play. And so I played the guitar a little while, and then I heard this guy, the Con Hunley's uncles they had a band was outside. And they showed me, one of them showed me how to pick a banjo a little bit. And I was sanding floors, and I said, now, I ain't never going to play for a living, but I'll play enough to get people in my store. Well, I was making, minimum wage was $1.25, and I was making $2 an hour. And this guy heard me playing in Gatlinburg, and he said, if you'll come up here and play for us, he lived right below Don Gibson. He said, if you'll come up here and play for me, he said, I'll give you $20 to play an hour every night.
Wow.
He said, now if they want extra, it costs them $30 a piece. He said, if he says, well, I need a little more, I said, you stay there. And that's just half, and so he said, if you want to, if we go another hour, we'll get another $10. So I went up there and played, and that done it. I went back and told my boss, I said, I'm not going to do no more floor sanding after this week. I'm going to start playing music. And that was 1964. I quit my job and started playing for the biggest part of my living. And then I built a music barn in 66, August the 20th. And then by 67, I believe, I went to Violin Buster. And that was like 28 states. That was a big show.
Oh, yeah.
On Saturday, you had Porter Wagner, Wilburn Brothers, and the Jim Walter Home Show, which was Violin Buster.
Right. Yeah, Jim Walter Holmes was a big thing in that area. Yeah, up in West Virginia, where I came from, they were big up that way, too. Yeah.
Yeah, boy, he was a rich guy. He had 28 states of television. That's about what Porter had and Wilburn at that time.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about the stuff that I cut my teeth on. I can play a radio is about it. I do play a little rhythm guitar with guys, but I'm just, not really a musician, but I've always loved that type of music and being my dad being from Tennessee, and you're from such a rich area there with so many, stars that came from that area.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Kenny
now,
Chesney. We worked with Kenny. I worked for Roy Cuff, Con Hunley. I was with Con two Saturdays ago, not this past Saturday, but Saturday before that.
I didn't know he was still around. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Con's still performing. And Roy, I worked some with him. So many people I worked with.
Yeah.
Chet's been to my store. At my barn been there, and I've done sound for him. And
Now, how did you get the Ciderville name?
How did I get the name?
The name for your barn, yeah,
This
Ciderville.
fella moved here in 1955. He had an art shop. I went to work for Mr. Epson. And when he did, he had a big art shop that he had built. It's like a house trailer, but it's an art shop. He moved it here and started selling artwork. And he went up to Mr. Walker and got all of his windows to do cartoons and all the ice cream cones and stuff like that. And when he did, why, he said, I've got to have something for my wife to do. And he started making cider. Said she could sell cider during the day, which he bought a big old cider mill, and they put it on the electric motor, and we made truckloads of cider. And then after I got done that, why, I just thought, well, shoot, this all just be in business. And so then I done that up till I got my musical job.
I see. Now, your store is, you sell musical instruments there, right?
Yeah.
All right. Tell us a little bit about your store, what you got in there.
Well, my store, it started out as selling cider. When that guy moved out, I bought him out, and he let me have it, and I was 16-year-old then. And then I loved music, and I started trading on the instruments. And I got hooked in with Joe Morrell music, which was a big, he had several stores at that time. And when he did, why, I told him I always wanted to get in the music business, and he put me on consignment to sell for him and give me half a profit. And oh man, I started knocking down some bucks, and I thought I was really going wee with that. And so I just kept on footing along to it. I just started getting into store business so much. See, I was getting 2 checks from Barney and Buster, but I had to give my sister Faye one to run the store. I kept my road check, and she got my TV check to work for me because it wouldn't pay its way. And then it just, from there, it just went on big till I went to these big variety stores like Super X and AJ variety stores and big drug stores and stuff like that. I'd go in there and they'd let me put a cabinet in that held 75 different things. All kinds of tuners and strings and picks and capos and electric cords and straps. I put that in, and then they started selling so much, we started putting in drums and guitars and stuff. So we had 60 stores like that. And Karen, she had to run route for me all the time. And it just started getting bigger and bigger. So I got it and sold it out about.
I see.
In the 90s, I guess, 95 or 7 or somewhere there. So.
Well, I want to ask you about something that my listeners will remember from Cass's ads. But before I do that, I want to ask you, do you remember anything about the dog dipping day?
About what now?
Dog dipping day. Does that ring a bell to you?
No, I can't understand what you're talking about.
Dipping dogs. Okay, let me read this for you.
Okay.
Said the promotion, this is from the book, Cass Walker by Jonathan Hodge. And I'll read this real quick. But the promotion that brought the biggest laugh from both the audience and the councilman himself was Dog Dipping Day, held at his Pennington Gap, Virginia store.
I know what you're talking about now. Yeah, I remember that real well.
Okay, tell us what you remember about.
He started to have it on my festivals. I'd have a bluegrass festival, and I'd get Mr. Walker to come, and he'd bring this big old barrel of a container, and and he's going to dip your dogs free. Compliments of the Cass Walker supermarkets, and he had it all over his supermarkets. You dipped them for fleas and ticks. You got rid of all the fleas and ticks, and it didn't cost you nothing. So here you'd come out and dip your dog for nothing. And he had something, but see, also on Superderm Save Company, he was into medical just a little bit. I own it now. I still sell Superderm.
Well, that's the other thing I wanted to ask you about. But I want to real quick before we leave this about this dog dipping. This was amazing to me. They said that this was at the Pennington Gap, Virginia store.
Yeah.
And it said that they advertised, it said, this is the same dip that Cass Walker dips his own coon dogs in. So they gave away a free $2 dip with every $10 grocery order.
Yeah.
And he said the amazing thing was they dipped 737 dogs in 2 days, and the business picked up $20,000 that weekend.
Yeah.
Dipping
Right.
I thought that was pretty amazing.
That's like Digger Odell. It went, I forget how many $1,000 a day. He had people lined up.
What a
He done
genius.
stuff like that to bring people in, see?
Yeah.
And,
Well, my listeners will remember the Superderm salve because Cass would run ads in Full Cry magazine about that. Tell us about that a little bit, if you would.
With Superderm safe, see, he said it was colon cancer real bad. Now, I wasn't working with him at that time, but I remember him talking about it on TV. He had colon cancer, and it was bad. They didn't think he was going to pull through it. And his wife was somewhere, and she found this stuff called Magiderm, and she bought a bottle of it and brought it home as a jar. It's like an ointment that you rub on, and he rubbed it on his wounds and stuff, and it healed them. And when it did, he went and bought the company and changed it to Superderm because it was so stout. He didn't want them to think it was a magic thing. He wanted them to tell them it was for real. It was Superderm. He changed it to Superderm instead of Magiderm. And he got to be a real big company, real big. And listen, I don't know if it was him or the faith he had in it. He had a knot came up on his head, up on his forehead, half the size of a pencil eraser. Ordinary pencil eraser like you took to school with you. Mm-hmm. It was half that size. And he said, he called us musicians, always tell my boys to come over here. And I was the first one there. He's sitting in his big armchair doing television. He says, I want all you people out there in TV land, watch me. I have in my hand a jar of Superderm. I'm going to rub it on this knot right here. I don't know what it is. I'm not checked or nothing, but you can see it. I'm going to put this on it for 10 days, and it's going to be gone. And you can watch it leave every day. And he sure did that. And I watched it for 10 days, and the 10th day, it just started getting littler and littler and littler and littler, and it just went away. So, he believed in it so strong. He used it for everything. If he got a sunburn, he put it on it. And I sold it. They even made a sunburn lotion out of it, too. And I started, I use it and sell it, too. I have people buys it, bunches of it now. We still sell it at the store. And
I didn't realize you could still get it. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We still got it. And on WYSH, they're running commercials. We got you call the Cass Walker store online. You can get it online through the Cass Walker store.
I see.
So we own that too. And the T-shirts and anything that's got his name on it. I hear a lot of people out there bootlegging it occasionally, but I don't worry about it too much. But if it's got the Cass Walker label on it, it's supposed to go through me because he gave me Tennessee. It comes under Tennessee Valley Advertisement Agency. He gave me that. We owe me that before he passed away. And so it, if we want to make hats and shirts and
you own
anything I make with the Cass Walker logo, it's mine.
Sure. Well, Cass Walker certainly was a legend in our sport, and being able to get this up close and personal look at Cass's life from one of his closest friends has been just over the top good for me, and I know my listeners have really enjoyed our time together today, David. I can't say enough in thanks to you for coming on with me. I know even at your age, you're still a very busy man, and I certainly wish you the best going forward. Do you think maybe sometime in the future we can visit again? Because I know you've got a lot more.
Where are you located?
Okay, I'm actually located. Our studio here is on the west coast of Florida. But I travel up through that way quite often.
Well, you got to come see us because we have we have a book, Mr. Walker, life history book, My Life History. You need to get that one. That is a good one. It's online. You can get it through the Cass Walker store.
I'll get it.
You can get it through Ciderville. And then he wrote the White Caps and Bluebills. Oh, man, that's a book. That's when they had to take the town over Sevierville.
Oh,
the White Caps and the Bluebills. You'll want that.
All right, folks.
Cass Walker, My Life History, he wrote it himself. And I know the one you're talking about you got because I played for that guy when he put it out.
Right. But now you're saying Cass's book that he wrote is called
My Life History.
My Life History by Cass Walker.
Yeah, you can get it. You can order it from Ciderville, or you can just look on the online on the Cass Walker store because we still do pick up the morning paper on it.
Okay.
And they do a lot of ads on it, but they sell that stuff online like crazy.
All right. Well, I'll see if I can find that. Is there
that's got him telling the stories himself.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, you'll love it.
Absolutely. Well, can we get a little sound clip of that morning paper tune that you guys did for the podcast, or is that something we'll have to get rights to?
You mean we could do it for you, but I ain't got no band here or something.
Well, we may need, we'll...
pick up the morning paper when it's the street, Cass Walker's prices can't be beat. Buy that blue band of coffee and you want some more. Do your grocery shopping at a Cass Walker store. And then you say that again, and let's say it. Do your grocery shopping at a Cass Walker store. We just did a show Thursday for the veterans.
Oh,
I believe
God bless
it's Friday. It was Friday for the veterans. And that's what they wanted us to do, the Cass Walker theme song.
That's awesome. I'm going to see if I can find the soundtrack of that online?
Yeah, Dolly's got it on her CDs.
Okay. Well, good. I'll have to look that up. Well, David, it's been an absolute joy to visit with you today, and we'll wrap this one up for this time, but we'll sure get back with you and just wish you the best going forward. And you're on a radio show still once a week, aren't you, there in Knoxville?
Yeah. It's called WYSHTV.com, I believe is where it's listed, but it's on. It's worldwide, and it's on 2 TV stations and I believe 3 or 4 radio stations.
And the name of that show again is?
WYSH.
WYSH is the station.
Yeah, Wish Radio, and I think it's TV. It may be Channel 10, Channel 12, BBB. Try this too. Channel 12, BBB television.
Okay, and the name of the show is what?
Is Stars and Stories of the Cass Walker Show.
Awesome. Okay.
You can get it somewhere on there, but you can just look it up and find it on there and watch it too.
Yeah, well, I'll
and
certainly
you get a lot of Cass Walker stuff. And I was there with him when he was talking about beating them people up on the parking lot, putting them in the hospital, and you hear us laughing in the background. You see us.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll look for that. Well, David West, a real joy to have you on our program today, sir. It was a genuine pleasure to talk about your friend and legend, Cass Walker. Friends, that's going to do it for the Gone to the Dogs podcast for this week. We hope that you will continue to support W Hunting Supply. They are our sponsors that keep this thing on the internet each week at dusupply.com, and we'll catch you down the road. Special thanks to Jason Wood for sharing his boyhood memories of Cass Walker. I hope that you've enjoyed this tribute to a true legend in coon hunting.